So thank you all so much for giving me an opportunity to speak and be with you. Very humbled and appreciative to be here. I thought I'd just kind of just briefly explain my perspective. I think it kind of informs what I plan on sharing here with you. As we all know, the community college system has such a diverse student body, and I represent a returning student. Just turned 31 a few weeks ago, and I started college in 2005 at Solano, and went into that dropout phase where work and bills and life sort of took over, and panned out the way it always does. You know what I mean? For some people, I decided that I needed to come back and finish off a degree I'd started a long time ago. So when I did, I came back without a lot of the student skills that you sort of have when you've been in class and you're used to going and dealing with professors and doing homework and balancing those two things with work and life. So I had to reaccustom myself to that. And I thought a clever way to do it would to be through online classes. And, I just kind of heard that was the success model for a lot of adult students. And so I jumped right in with that. But I was completely out of practice. I had very little of the skills I had originally when it came to being a student. And so I met some adversity early on trying to do these online courses. As I got kind of into student government and more plugged into the college system, I took some of those sort of analog classes, with actual sit-down professors and stuff, and it started to work. And I kind of got back in the zone. But what really stood out is once I got back in the zone and I was really going and doing well again, I took some online courses again just because I felt like I was ready now. Because I did think that they were going to be more demanding or more difficult. And, what I discovered is that the difficulty was in the personal discipline, because you have to actually get on, do it yourself, and you don't have a classroom culture around you to kind of keep you going. And so as I struggled with this one particular class, I did fine with quite a few other ones, but I came into a creative writing course that was online. And it just basically engaged all of my weaknesses as far as education is concerned, long assignments, that are a little bit more, broad and, creative. And it just took a lot of writing and stuff like that. So as I started to fall behind and trying to balance student government and everything together, something really stood out. This particular professor I had, it was a critical thinking class for writing. It was 004. And he noticed that I hadn't logged in, I think, for the week or something, and he just checked in. And it sort of surprised me because I hadn't really been reached out to by a professor in that way, even in an actual classroom, a physical classroom. And so that sort of just stood out to me. And I said, oh, wow, someone's paying attention. And on an online class, that was just an odd kind of feeling, just to say, this was beginning to feel more engaging and more, direct than even a physical class was. And as it continued, and I continued to struggle, and I would kind of bounce back and forth, this professor just began to just really blow my mind with his level of concern, how he would reach out regularly, check in with me, and he did a couple things where he even offered to give me some time management coaching, pull me off to the side. And I had never met such a professor that had such I call it like a culture of completion and caring. It's like this guy wanted me to finish this class and do well. And he was showing it with so much energy and so much passion just through Canvas, and so even though it's not a physical class, I hadn't received um, so much direct interest, and I thought, is this because of Canvas or is it because of this professor? And I think because I've had other online courses, there are professors that are so engaged with the students, and then there are others who have like 120 students, and I can't imagine how they go through so many or grade so many assignments and all that. So in this, more kind of writing arena, he's so expressive with his emails, his messages, that it really rallied me, and it really helped me to connect and reinvest. And because what it came down to was like all of the information is in the book, right? And it's all in the library and it's all on the web now. And really the biggest impact that these courses have comes through what that professor brings to the table, I feel. And I think that's what really stood out in that instance, and what I suddenly realized might have been missing other times, And it's not that I had like a particularly like personal connection with this person. It's just the amount of concern and his approach. And so I don't know if he had like stock emails that he was just dropping my name into, to kind of manage all of his students and be able to handle it. But, rather than having my name at the very beginning of the email and, then thank you at the end, like my name was like embedded into like the little areas of the body of the actual messages. And whether or not he had to go in and customize those himself or not, what I received out of that was sincerity and at least, that concern, and I knew even if that was what he was doing, which I don't really know if it was, it came across, and it really impacted me, and it helped me to really, like I said, reinvest and come through and commit again when I was starting to falter. It was easy to hide behind, absences and stuff in the physical class because people just think you either dropped or whatever. But this guy didn't give me that excuse, and he put the ball back in my court and said, I'm going to give you everything you need. Are you going to do this? And so I felt like that really stood out, and not only on an online course, but even if it were in a physical class. And so I guess what it came down to is like, I don't know if he was using new tools like the internet and like direct messaging to achieve an old goal, which is, to get students to pass their classes, or whatever that goal is for a particular professor, or if he was just shifting his goal entirely, and that's, I think, the big broad question that I came to with this situation was, with technology entering the teaching arena and academia beginning to embrace new forms, are we just using new tools to achieve the same objectives we always have, or are we shifting the objective in some more fundamental way where rather than being focused entirely on disseminating information, are we moving more towards a connection and that culture of completion for a student, because like I said, the information's there, and if we're self-starters, we're going to be able to get to it. But is that objective really to engage the student in a way where they just can't put the class down anymore, and they've got to finish it now? And that could be a really hard thing to do, and it's hard to do on an individual or on a large basis. But I think that's kind of the question that I come to the conversation with, are we using new tools to achieve new objectives, or are we using new tools to achieve old objectives, or are we introducing a new kind of objective entirely?